Welcome to the Enduro Method Podcast. Joshua Rempel here with Dane Tony.
Hello.
And we're back for episode 2 in our nutrition series. But first, just kind of give you a brief overview of what we've been up to, why it's taken us so long to get another episode out.
Sorry.
Yeah. So I think it started, Dane was coaching up in for Dirtastic.
Yep, I had one camp up in Clancy, Montana, and then the following weekend I had one up in Coeur d'Alene. So I was out doing that for about a week and a half, but that was super fun. Met a lot of cool ladies and feel so lucky to have that opportunity. Shout out to Dirtastic with Caitlin.
Yeah. And then after that, last weekend we were up in Drummond, Montana at the Bearmouth Extreme race put on by Enduro. Joe.
Thank you, Joe.
Yeah, it was an awesome race, super fun. Kind of a shorter course with just kind of as many laps as possible within a time frame. It was a blast, great course, a lot of fun terrain. So did that on Saturday, and then Sunday came back, and on our way back, kind of making our way home, stopped off to do some riding. About a half hour out from the truck.
On the way back.
On the way back Sunday evening, coming around I think it was a right-hand corner, there was somebody had it was like a 6-inch tree that somebody had cut off right at handlebar height on an inside corner, kind of hidden by a rock. And right there, the trail actually kind of dropped off as well. So as I was coming around, I saw it too late. I was kind of leaning and hugging the inside, and tire kind of rolled over a rock, so it was already on its way down and caught my pinky, 5th metatarsal bone between the edge of the stump and my handlebar. Crunched it, felt it immediately, pulled over, looked at it. It was like not in the right shape, bleeding profusely. So luckily my buddy had a first aid kit, so we wrapped it up. Rode back to the truck, kind of did some preliminary examinations, realized it was kind of screwed. Kind of loaded up, went to the ER. Bozeman was closest.
Went to the ER and to just kind of see what we were working with. And it was actually a really good idea that we did, because now that we've gone through the whole gamut of everything, there was a cut that went all the way down to the bone, and so that was really good that we got that flushed out and cleaned out.
Yeah, because there was chunks of bark and stuff in there.
There was definitely debris in there. So yeah,
So that was Sunday, so we got back Monday, and then kind of all of this week's been a whirlwind of doctors and
went in for surgery on Thursday.
Yeah, so got 4 pins in the bone. It was broken into 6 pieces.
Which is funny, because if you look at your pinky finger, like it's literally not your fist knuckle, or actually the bone between your fist knuckle and then your first knuckle and your pinky, that little bone there was broken into 6 pieces, which just seems just so crazy. You literally shattered it.
Yeah.
And somehow they put all those 6 pieces back together, which just seems super crazy. But
yeah, it was good to get it done right. I mean, from a future standpoint, right, the better this thing heals up, the less hopefully problems I'll have down the road. I mean, just from this, I'll probably expect to have arthritis in my knuckle and stuff like that, but
whoops.
Yeah, as long as it works and it curls and uncurls and I can hold a handlebar. It's best case scenario. So
yeah, so that's really put a little bit of a damper in our start to summer. With that, unfortunately, Josh will not be racing Silver Mountain, which is here in a couple weeks. However, I will be, so we will actually both be there. So come find us. We'll have swag to be selling. So if you want a Enduro Method hat or shirt or whatever, come find us. Maybe Josh will be there, man in the fort.
Yeah.
I'll be racing, and then we had Donner on our radar, which got moved to July. However, I think that's at week 5 of his recovery, so that one's probably
I think I get pins out in 4 weeks is what I was told.
Yeah.
And then Yeah,
So might be questionable, but probably unlikely. So yeah, great start to the summer. Woohoo!
Yeah.
Well, we were just talking before the podcast, and we were talking about maybe we need to do a podcast on overcoming adversity.
Yeah. Dealing with disappointment.
How to deal with disappointment. So anyways, that's where we've been, what we've been up to, and apologies for taking so long for this to get out. I mean, we recorded the first one. We're like, okay, next week we'll record the next one, and we've just been running around. So anyways, our last podcast for the nutrition series, we talked about the basics of nutrition, kind of gave you an idea of where to start. We talked a lot about quality of food. And then in this episode, we're going to be talking more about quantity. So kind of diving a little bit more into the nitty gritty of how much you are consuming. So in that first episode, we really encourage you to track. If you wanted to change your nutrition, we encourage you to track what you're eating and find out what is going into your mouth. So in this episode, we'll talk about how to break that knowledge down into and how to how to better understand the quantity piece.
Well, yeah, and quantity of each macro, right?
Right.
So macronutrients just refer to basically carbohydrates, fats, and proteins. There's also things called micronutrients, which are more like along vitamins and stuff like that, which are also very important, but we're not getting into that at all. And just from like a body composition standpoint, macronutrients is where you want to spend your time.
Yep. So macronutrients are the components of food that the body needs for energy. And they also help maintain the body's structures and systems. So macronutrients can be broken down into three things. We got the protein, fat, and carbs. So protein allows your body to grow, build, and repair tissues. Super important. It also helps maintain and protect your lean muscle mass, or lean body mass, aka how much muscle you have. Then we have fat, which allows you to store energy. It helps kind of cushion and protect our organs. Fats also help make certain hormones. It helps absorb fat-soluble vitamins. Fun fact, the uber popular and essential vitamin D, is actually a fat-soluble vitamin. So if you're taking vitamin D, make sure you're taking that with some fats, some healthy fats. And that's kind of what fats are. There are three types. There are trans fats, saturated fats, and unsaturated fats. And then we go into carbohydrates, which is the third macronutrient. That's fiber, starches, and sugars, are essential food nutrients that your body turns into glucose that gives you energy to function. Boom. So that's what they are. That's what the three macronutrients are, and kind of why they matter.
Yeah, so when we're looking at total calories, right? Calories are made up of the macronutrients. And if you're trying to kind of assign values to those, you got four calories per gram of protein, then you got 4 calories per gram of carbohydrate, and then you got 9 calories per gram of fat. So fat is more dense, nutrient dense out of the three. So when you're trying to kind of break down percentages or how much of each macronutrient you're eating, it's just you need to make sure you got those numbers correct.
The right calculation.
Yeah.
So starting out when talking about macros is you got to find your total number of calories you're basing your macros off of. Right. So there's a lot of calculators out there. I would say most of them. I'll say any because Google is very scary, but most of them are probably pretty perfect.
Perfect in the sense they give you a rough estimate of starting spot. Not perfect in the sense that that's like set in stone number.
Yeah, end all be all.
Right.
Yeah, so sorry, not perfect, but there are great starting spots.
Exactly. You got to start somewhere.
Yeah. So one I use a lot is just healthyeater.com. And when you go in there or any of these calorie defining tools, you basically enter whether you're male, female, your height, your weight, and then your activity level. Be really honest with your activity level. You know, some of them have more description than others, but you know, for instance, I actually consider us fairly low activity level, even though we own a gym. It seems like a very active,
a little counterintuitive.
Yeah, but we actually spend a lot of time at the desk. So really kind of being honest with yourself there. You know, if you're working construction and you're a laborer, that's actually probably on the high end. Right. So make sure to read the descriptions of that. But that will help spit out a starting number of calories for you to then make adjustments to, whether you are looking to gain weight or lose weight.
Right. And what those calculators are doing, they're just assigning a calorie number per pound of body weight. And again, it's just a baseline starting point. So you could, and I don't necessarily use this as math, but just as an example, you know, a lower activity level might be 13 calories per pound of body weight, right? And you would just multiply that out, and that would give you a starting point. And if you're on a higher activity level, maybe you're taking in 15 calories per pound of body weight, right? And you can do the math, and that's probably somewhere between a difference of 300 to 500 calories, you know, depending on whether you're very active or not as active. Mm-hmm. And so, again, it's just giving you a range that then you can use to start and see what happens, right? And so once you have that range and you have your calories and you're consistent with that for 2 weeks and you're checking on the scale and in the mirror, you're able to see, you know, maybe you've put on 2 pounds and you're like, oh, maybe my maintenance calories are a little bit lower, right? So you need to pull some off. Or if you're already losing weight and that's your goal, you're like, oh, cool, I'll just ride this out until I quit losing weight on the scale, right? Mm-hmm. So anyways, again, it's just a baseline. It's just a reference point to start from. But those formulas come from different people who have created them over the years. So there's a couple different names behind them, but they're all relatively close.
Yeah, and you know, pick one, start there, and give it a whirl. So you find your calories. And then from there, you want to subtract, if you're trying to lose weight, 200 to 500 calories.
Roughly, yeah.
And then if you're trying to gain weight, you're adding 200 to 500 calories.
Yep. And the main reason why you don't want to go over that is because if you let's use an example of somebody who wants to put on some lean muscle mass, right?
So you're trying to gain weight.
So you're trying to gain weight. So if that individual starts, just as a super high example, let's say they just double their food intake, they're not able to build muscle fast enough to keep up with the surplus, right? So you're going to end up adding body fat, which is readily easily done. Okay, so basically the food has to go and do something, and since it's not actually doing anything productive within the body, your body's just going to store it, and it's going to get stored as body fat. So that's why you don't want to just make these massive jumps in either direction, in deficit or gain, because you want it to be productive, and you want it to be productive in the sense of you want your body to be able to have the time to turn it into lean tissue, right, and apply it to where you're trying, rather than just throwing all these calories at it and then just getting it stored as body fat. Mm-hmm. And so same in the deficit, if you cut too many calories off, and there's also metabolic things that happen that could not be good, but if you take too many calories away and you're trying to lose weight, your body's going to actually start cannibalizing its own muscle supply, right? And the goal with all of this stuff is to maintain increased lean body mass over time, not necessarily take it away. Mm-hmm. And just from a health standpoint and longevity standpoint, I think it's basically been determined now that the amount of lean muscle mass you carry as you age is a predictor of how long you're going to live. So it's very important to maintain and try and increase lean body muscle mass as you age.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we've calculated our total calories.
Yep.
Now what?
So in general, you usually want to start with protein first. So, and again, there's different schools of thought on this, but you definitely want a certain amount per pound of body weight, right? And that on the low side, and this, I would say this would be on the really low side, depends what books you read, who you listen to. But 0.6 per gram per pound of body weight is on the low side, and then on the higher side, it's 1 gram per pound of body weight. And you could even go up higher than that. But unless you're maybe like a bodybuilder or power lifter or something where you're really trying to increase muscle mass or whatever, like 1 gram per pound of body weight's pretty high, and that's pretty good. So like actually that's kind of what I shoot for. Then if I'm a little lower, that's I'm not stressing it at all. But living in that 0.8 to 1 gram per pound of body weight usually is a good place to start with protein. And so how that would work is you would take, so for me, let's say 220 pounds, I would then multiply that by 4, right? Because there's 4 calories per gram of protein. So that would be 440, 880. So that would be 880 calories of protein, right? Mm-hmm. So then I would subtract that from my total calories, and I would have, a certain amount left. Now, the next two, right? So then you're figuring out fats and carbs. This becomes very dependent on what works best for you. So maybe you're someone where fats, you like a higher fat, lower carb diet, more like on the keto side. Or you're a lower fat, higher carb person, right? Totally dependent on what you've experienced, how your body deals with this stuff, how what works best for you, your lifestyle, your energy levels, all those things. So, but you're just taking what's left over, and then you're figuring out, usually you do fats next, figure out your fats, and then whatever's left is your carbs, right? And you just got to remember that the fats are 9 calories per gram, and carbs are 4 calories per gram. Very important when you're trying to figure that out, or you're going to get a lot of fats. So that would be kind of how you break that down. Typically, those calculators we were talking about earlier will actually spit those numbers out for you as well. And you can just use that as a starting point. But why it's so important, right? We need protein to build and maintain lean muscle mass, and we need an adequate amount to be able to do that. And then from there, when you're talking about energy sources, fats, essentially your brain runs your brain, your organs, all those things. So you need fats for just daily, just to be alive. Yep. And then you can think of carbs are basically for energy, right? And so if you're more of a sedentary person, you maybe just need less carbs overall, right? And if you're more active and going all the time, maybe you need to add in more carbs to be able to sustain that lifestyle. So just a real general way of thinking about it. That's kind of a good way to go about it.
Yeah, in my precision nutrition certification, they actually broke down macronutrients based on body type. I thought this was super interesting, but there's 3 different body types. You have your mesomorph, your endomorph, and your ectomorph body type. And so mesomorph would be like kind of somebody that has always been really muscly, pretty even weight from chest to thighs, and just kind of like maybe broader shoulders.
Kind of your athletic build.
Yeah, kind of like your athletic build. I would definitely probably put Josh in this category. And in there, they kind of prescribe more an equal percentage protein, carbs, and fat to that individual, that body type, not that individual, that body type. And then I thought it was interesting because then you have the Ectomorph, which I believe is the tall and skinny. So like the people that are just rails, super thin, normally the type of person that like eats as much as they want, but they can never seem to gain weight. I also call them hard gainers. So they have a hard time gaining weight.
Typically like your endurance athlete kind of body type, like
Or like my dad.
Well, yeah, just as an example so you get a visual, but, not carrying any excessive body weight, really, built to run.
Yeah, so, okay, I'm looking it up right now. Yep, the Ectomorph is tall and skinny. The Endomorph would be more kind of rounder around the hips. So they tend to kind of hold on to weight easier. I always kind of refer to this to like look back as what you were like as a kid. Were you kind of more like the doughier one, or like were you just like super skinny and like a rail? Endomorph is heavily muscled yet carrying extra body fat around the midsection. So that's kind of what that looks like. So the Endomorph, the one that's a little more quote unquote doughier, they actually encourage a lower carb, higher fat percentage. The actual percentages would look like this: 35% protein, 25% carbs, and then 40% fat. The Mesomorph, like I was saying, was kind of like the they put them as competitive bodybuilders, heavyweight powerlifters, and just somebody that has a lot of muscle, I guess. They like to say they have a moderate carbohydrate intolerance. So it'd be percentage-wise, 30% protein, 40% carbs, and 30% fat. Then we go to the Ectomorph. These are the hard gainers. They typically have a fast metabolic rate, and they typically have a higher carbohydrate tolerance. So their breakdown actually comes to be 25% protein, 55% carbohydrate, and 20% fat. So I thought that, I always think this is super interesting, breaking it down based on your body type and kind of your quote-unquote carbohydrate tolerance. But what we're getting at is, adjust what works for you in the end. And then above all, consistency is king. You have to actually give what you're trying a good, solid shot before making adjustments to see if it works or not. So like Josh had mentioned earlier, 2 weeks, and that's 2 weeks of doing it straight, not I do it for 3 days, have a cheat meal, and then continue on for another 3 days, have another cheat meal. Like, it is 2 weeks, 14 days of doing it. I would say adhering almost 100%.
Yeah, and that's on the low side. I was just using that as like a baseline just to get started.
Yeah. But like 2 weeks, and then in order to see where you end up, and then making adjustments. So, all this talk on macronutrients are great, and people lose weight, get leaner, perform better. These are really awesome ways to dial all that in. But if you're not adhering to the protocol and being honest with yourself as how much you're actually abiding by your macros, they won't work.
Right. Yeah, and with it, counting macros is kind of a pain. I do honestly think everybody should do it at least once, because it gives you a new understanding of food and how much things are worth, in a sense. Like, you're going to look at a Snickers bar different after you know that that's actually like 2 hours on the rower to burn than you did before. Because, what's a Snickers? 500 calories? 400? Somewhere in there?
I have no idea.
That's like 60 minutes on the rower at a pretty hard pace. Like, that's a lot of work.
Yeah.
It sucks. And so when you actually go, oh, I can eat this in 20 seconds, and yet it takes me an hour of constant activity to burn. I don't know. It gives you a new understanding of what you're eating and if you really need it.
I think the main thing is understand, like kind of what he's getting at, but understanding what you're eating and what your meals should be comprised of. If your meal is, let's say, gluten-free pizza. I say that just because we may have had that last night. There's the likelihood of what that pizza is comprised of macronutrient wise is I'm not going to guarantee, but I'm probably guessing that it's really high in carbs and really high in fats and really low in protein, because a cheese pizza doesn't have much protein in it at all. There is protein in cheese, but there's also a ton of fat.
Right.
So like actually taking what you're eating and then conceptualizing it into carbs, fats, and proteins. And my biggest takeaway is always having protein be the beginning of my meal. So if I'm making a dinner, okay, I'm going to have that protein be my base, my foundation. So chicken, we'll say. And then from there, sprinkle in the carbs and fats. I always, vegetables are really high in carbs, not really high. They are mostly carbohydrates. So, but they're also very nutrient dense, and they also have a lot of fiber involved, which is also good for the body and helps digest your food. So veggies are very good and kind of help add to your carbohydrate sources. If you need more carbohydrates, starches like potatoes, and then things like rice, beans. Beans actually can go carb and protein. But anyways, filling in that carbohydrate gap, and then where your fats come in. What did you cook your protein in?
Right. And usually fats take care of themselves, in all honesty. If you're cooking your own food, and hopefully with avocado or olive oil or something, right, but if you're sauteing vegetables, you don't really need to think about adding fats. You don't need to add some butter, right? Unless you're cooking in it. Because it's kind of just taken care of. So like Dan said, I do the same. I think of protein first. That's always the cornerstone of what I'm eating. So look at that. Again, chicken breast, great example. Put that on a plate. Maybe I want broccoli. Okay, that'll take care of some veggies, green veggies. I'm going to cook that in olive oil, and that's basically a meal. And then if you're active that day, you throw some potatoes or yams or something in there, or rice, but that's it, and that takes care of it. And then the things that get snuck in that add up real quickly, especially in the fats category, you could sour cream with the potato, or butter with the potato, and all of a sudden you're
But all macronutrients and tracking it and counting it does is really just bring awareness to your food and what it's comprised of, and like how far it goes. My favorite example is freaking peanut butter. I mean, I can eat a jar of peanut butter like it's nobody's business. However, if you look at the grams of fat within 2 tablespoons of peanut butter and how many calories are in that, I mean, you'll know real quick that you really have to be mindful of how much peanut butter you're either spooning out of the jar or putting on your toast or whatever you're using with it. But it really just helps kind of bring awareness to that. And 2 tablespoons of peanut butter is not a whole lot of food, but is super calorically dense and has a ton of fat in it. So if I'm allotted, say, 70 grams of fat in my day, and I can knock out 2 tablespoons of peanut butter and get 15 grams in a hot second. So
right.
And salad dressing is another one these are things that I've learned over the years, but salad dressing is crazy. So you think you're being healthy eating a salad, but if you soak your salad in dressing,
ranch
or whatever, the calories and specifically the amount of fat you get in that can really add up. So we really like to kind of get our fats with our cooking oils, and then also things like avocados and nuts, and things like that. So tracking.
But same with the nuts. You can overeat you can overeat nuts super fast, like throughout the day. Because if you're like, oh, it's a healthy snack, but you're having 4 handfuls of nuts, which the handful is probably bigger than a serving size anyways. Again, you're at like 30, 35 grams of fats just for a snack. They really didn't even do much for you because you were still eating your full meals after your snack anyways. So like, yeah, it brings awareness to how much food you're eating.
Yeah. And so we've done a lot of nutrition challenges at the gym, and I think we've followed one protocol called Renaissance periodization, and it's basically macronutrients, and then they break it down per meal.
It's like how to count calories for dummies, essentially.
Yeah, and they put it in this really organized spreadsheet, and I mean everyone that we had that followed it saw incredible results.
Yep.
But that's just the thing. It goes back to being consistent and goes back to adhering to your protocol, whatever that may be, and not straying away from it. But the biggest takeaway all of these people got was like, oh wow, I didn't realize how much. Basically, most commonly is how much carbs and fat I eat and how little protein I eat.
Yep, very common.
And like, what do I do? Like, what do I do for breakfast? I eat oatmeal. Okay, great. Oatmeal is 100% carbs. So trying to make that protein your foundation of your meals and then build off of that. So really kind of bringing light to that, whether you take it super far and start tracking everything in MyFitnessPal and make your grams and, work on hitting that. Or even if you just do it for a month, I think there's a ton of benefit to that.
Yeah. Protein is by far the most under-eaten macro, and then fats and carbs are overeaten, and carbs usually in the form of sugars.
Yeah.
But the other big part of that is protein. If you can get that dialed, helps with
feeling full,
right? So
satiety. I think it's the word. It's the technical term.
But it will help you feel full longer, and so you will not be as hungry in between meals. So that's a major part, because part of, if let's say you are someone who wants to lose weight, you are going to have to deal with a certain amount of being uncomfortable, right? You are going to be hungry. You might have periods of low energy that come along with that, all those things. So that's part of the game, right? And knowing that going in just helps, because it is going to happen at some point, right? And I mean, I remember, and look, I just want to clarify, when I was on, this was back in like 2015 or 16, I think, the first time I did RP, which is that Renaissance periodization. And I was on like month 3, cut 3. So I was, way down on calories from my baseline because I was trying to lose weight. And this is what I mean by clarify, is like, I wasn't even down to like super low. I was just down, right? Like the people who are like cutting for a bodybuilding show or physique show or something, it's crazy what they got to put up with. But basically, I would wake up and I would think about food until I went to sleep. Like, that's all I did. I'd be like, hey, I should go to the truck. I'm hungry. Hey, I need to walk. I'm hungry. Like, it was terrible. I mean, it was just a constant battle of thinking about food. And that's like what you're doing. That's part of the game. And so, as soon as I quit dieting, that feeling went away. But
the lessons were still there.
Oh, for sure. But what I'm getting at is like, that's part of it. Like, you gotta just kind of mentally prepare. Like, yeah, you're gonna be uncomfortable and you're gonna be hungry, but it's not the end of the world.
I don't remember that exact quote on hunger. Do you remember that one from Ben Greenfield? It's like, your hunger doesn't go away.
Well, it doesn't go away, and it doesn't compound. I think that's the important part. So like,
it doesn't get worse.
Yeah, it's not like a linear progression of hunger, right? So if you're really hungry this second, your brain extrapolates out that you're going to be 10 times hungrier in 10 minutes, right? That's how it works. But it's not actually how the body works. Like, you might even forget that you're hungry in 10 minutes if you're active and you're doing something else, and it might come back. So if you're feeling like you're going to die, you're not.
You're not going to die.
And it'll get better. But yeah, just sticking with the plan. So I think that's I don't know. Anything else you want to go on macros?
No, I think we made it there at the end. Just if you made it this far, the cherry on top there.
Yeah, I think the important part is there's calculators out there on the interwebs, right, that you can use, and if that's something you're interested in, or hiring a professional to help you, is always
another
a great option.
Shameless plug is, for Enduro Method with our premium option, you do get help with nutrition. So if you want to work one-on-one with us, we do offer this, but it is in that upgraded plan.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think try it, let us know how it goes. The next podcast we'll talk about race nutrition and how to eat for a race, or
just big days.
Yeah, or big days on the bike and how we approach that. So we'll be diving into that on the next episode.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed it and hope you have some valuable knowledge bombs that you can take into your life. We'll catch you next time. Thanks so much.
Thank you.